This is the Behind Closed Doors podcast, a podcast that talks about real life issues as seen through the lens of a millennial. We are not our circumstances are a part of us. So join me as we unpack these conversations. Who are you?
The two words that define who I am is go-getter.
Today's guest feature is a distinguished business development expert with over 15 years in the sector, presently the c.o.o. at FSIO. His journey includes pivotal roles at the Law Association of Zambia, UNHCR, and the Zambian Governance Foundation. His consultancy footprint spans over Zambia, South Africa, Senegal, and the US, driven by a passion for business development, social enterprise, and training. He holds an impressive academic profile with degrees from the University of Zambia, University of Zimbabwe, and the Copperbelt University. Welcome to Behind Closed Doors, Shadreck.
Thank you for having me.
I'm a little nervous because of how incredibly massive your CV is and your bio. And in a little while, we're going to delve into that. So I just want you to give us a brief but in-depth background of your journey to this moment now. I want us to talk about mostly success, but mostly also the journey that has brought you to the success that you have now, looking at how heavy your CV is.
Well, thank you. I mean, the CV is testament of my journey. And going back to your original question about who I am, I'm a go-getter. I come from a very humble background. 10 people, and I'm the 10th. By the time I was in grade 5, none of my siblings had gone past grade 10. No one had been to university. So for me, that was already a target set. You know, I told myself I was gonna get to places where none of my siblings go to. So if you look at my CV, I'm currently waiting for my results for my PhD, which is going to be my 4th degree now. But that hasn't been propelled by the desire to excel in the academics. It's largely because of where I'm from, and I want to make sure that I live and set an example for my children and my children's children who are going to get to where I've been and even excel.
It's interesting that you said that none of your siblings passed grade 10. And being in such a setup, what then motivated you to go past that? Was there somebody that you looked at and said, oh, I'd like to be like that person?
Yes. So because of my humble background, I lived in many different homes. I didn't grow up with my mother or my father. So back in the day when you're not, so I qualified to be a dependent, you know. So back in the day, if you were a dependent, it was very clear that one was a dependent and one was a child of the home, if I can call it that. So there was a clear distinction in, for example, the clothes that were bought for the children, the food, the schools that one went to. So a practical story. So someone I looked up to was my brother-in-law. He was very successful. He had more than 13 taxis. And at the time, that was a huge measure of success. So when I was in grade 7, I remember distinctively asking him if I could work as a security guard because I wanted to earn money. And for him being a businessman, he was moved. He was like, there were not so many grade 7s, not even his own children, who would offer to work as security guards, you know, at the workshop. So he gave me that job. And then at the end of the holiday season, he paid me. And that was one of my first moments, where you experience freedom because you have the money. And so I learned at a very tender age to work for whatever I got. So the first person I ever really looked up to was my brother-in-law.
And it's been evident that you've been working for everything that you have, looking at how successful you are. Tell me about your educational background.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep going back to the fact that, the humble background meant that you go to humble schools. So some of the the names of the schools won't even resonate. So I went to a primary school called Namatama Primary School in 1987. So I did my primary there. For my secondary school, because a friend of mine tells me that education is the best equalizer, So primary school, you don't really have a choice because your guardian or your parents decide where you want to go. But back then, when it came to secondary school, things were really good because if you pass and pass really well, you can go to a good school. So I did really well. I was third highest at our school, which at the time, I think there were about maybe 300 pupils. So to come third, that was quite an achievement. Made it to St. Raphael's Secondary School. Got 8 points in grade 12 and went to UNZA, where I studied Economics and Development Studies. And then from there, I think it was like no looking back. Decided to build on my first degree, did a master's in law, then did another master's in human security, and now I'm finishing up on my PhD in human security as well.
Was there something that specifically drove you to these courses that you've done? Or was it, okay, I've gotten into a good school, into a university, and now this is probably where the money will be? Or was there something that aligned with you that pushed you toward that?
So I'm passionate about human security, and that is why my last 2 degrees, my PhD and my third master's, have all centered on human security. I'm intrigued and I'm passionate about making a difference. So what I've done from my school is equipping me to, once I'm done with where I am right now as Chief Operating Officer, my goal is to contribute to my country, especially in the area of human security. And just to break that down, I know it kind of sounds cliche, but it's very simple when you consider what human security is. All of us right now want to be kind of secure, whether it's physical security, food security, environmental security, personal security. So that is what I'm passionate about, but with a focus on peace.
That's quite interesting, because my next question was about to be, please break that down for us.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's set a scene. You're done with your first degree. You're now in the society. You're looking for employment. How does that look?
Tough. The scene hasn't changed much. Still very high levels of unemployment. I stayed for almost a year before getting anything, So finally I got something 2004. So what helped me was, so I speak 8 different Zambian languages. So there was an advert from Care International for a research assistant. And the irony was, this person needed to be fluent in at least 5 languages, and I was fluent in 8, so I had an added advantage. So I got that job, but as a research assistant in the gender-based violence space. So I didn't know that would actually usher me into a career, because after I worked as a research assistant for care in the GBV space, my next job was with the UNHCR, so United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in Kawambwa. So I spent a couple of years there, and that is when my interest was even fueled to contribute to the peace space after working with refugees from Congo and hearing their stories, more horrid stories of what was happening in Congo and how they fled.
So take us through the journey of how your career journey professionally, how you moved from the refugees till being a COO now.
Yeah, sure. So the year is 2005, when I finally got a formal job with the UN operation. So I worked for HODI, which was an implementing partner for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. I was employed as income generating activities coordinator. Going back to my first response about being a go-getter, we managed to do a lot of things in the refugee camp. A lot of the things are still there up to now. We dug a fish pond. The fish ponds are still there, and the host villages are still getting fish from there. So I worked there for 2 years, and then I was called by CARE. Remember my initial story where I worked as a research assistant.
Yes,
so
yes.
I came back. So 2007 and 8 up to 2009, I was working as monitoring and evaluations coordinator for the GBV program. And then 2009, I had to leave to go and do my master's. When I came back a year later, I was equipped with a master's degree in law, human rights law, and by coincidence, UNHCR had just advertised for a position for mainstream UNHCR. So I applied. The interview process was rigorous, but fortunately I managed to get that position and was posted back to Kawambwa, where I started. And so you can imagine, you've just graduated from UNZA, you can relate with UNZA, the University of Zambia, and then your first job is like 1,000 kilometers away, somewhere you've never been, a rural, remote place. But now I look back, I'm like, I'm glad I actually did it, because the experience that I got there is what I've built on. So yeah, I went back to UNHCR in 2010, worked there for 2 years. Then the Law Association of Zambia advertised for a position, Deputy Executive Director. I applied for that one, and fortunately I got it. So I served as Deputy Executive Director for 4 years for a project of the Law Association of Zambia. That was my longest I ever stayed at any one place. But it was a very fulfilling career, exposed me to international, regional, as well as national laws. But I always felt I wasn't being optimal. Like there was more I could do. We did a lot with the Law Association of Zambia. We brought in a lot of money, but I felt like there was more I could do. So in 2017, I met John Fay, and I told him I felt like leaving the Law Association of Zambia. And then when I told him my history, my career history, then he just told me, Shadreck, you're an entrepreneur. And as long as you remain an entrepreneur, no one can employ you. You need to start your own thing. And if you're up to it, I'm happy for us to start something together. And that's how our journey started. I left the National Legal Aid, resigned, to start something an enterprise with John Fay, and we've never looked back since.
That's quite an interesting and diverse background. And now that you have been an employee and employer, let's talk about some of the strategies that one would need to be a good employee. Because looking at your background, your professional background, it shows how you've grown and how much you've achieved. So now, if we want other people to do the same in society, what do you think would be some of the qualities that they would need to propel in the professional sector?
Yeah. So Chonga, I'll tell you the truth. There's no two way about it. First of all, if I'm ranking what you need to be successful as an employee, it's hard work. You need to put in the work. You need to be sincere with yourself. Like, ask yourself tough questions. Am I putting in 100%? Wherever I've been, I've put in 120%. If we have to leave at 5, I always left at 6 or 6:30 p.m. In the UN operation, my supervisor was a gentleman from Cote d'Ivoire. He would be in the office at 5:30 in the morning. And up until that time, there was no one who would get to the office before me. So I had a challenge. This man used to be in the office at 5:30 a.m. So I started getting to the office at 5 because I wouldn't want my boss to be in the office before me. So that's the first one. Put in the work. I know a lot of people say it's more important to work smart than to work hard, but working smart comes after you've worked hard. That is my first one, and the second one I'll tell you is being professional. And being professional, I'll break that down in two. You need to have the skills, you need to have the knowledge, you need to have the ability in your profession, in whatever you're doing. That's one part of it. So continuous learning will make you be professional. But the second component about being professional is about being culturally appropriate. Different scenarios will require you to act differently, will require you to speak differently, dress differently. And the third and final one is feedback. Always asking questions. Where can I improve? What could I have done to be better? Craving and pushing for feedback. I know that's one of the things people don't really like, especially the millennials, but it's really helpful to find someone who will tell you the truth, just give you feedback about where you can improve. So those are the three key things that have largely led to my success.
As you were speaking, I was thinking of how we need to do a personal SWOT analysis, right?
Yeah.
And most of the time, because we're human, we tend to overlook the negative that we do. And like you mentioned, we don't really like being confronted with the bad aspects that we're doing. So how do you think me as CC, come to a place and say, you know what, these are your weaknesses? Because most of the times our weaknesses, we only look at them from a moral perspective and never from the professional perspective or the career perspective to say, okay, you are lazy. Quite all right, you get your job done. You're just doing what you're paid to do. You're doing the bare minimum. You're not good enough. You're not bad. You're just bare minimum. How do you tackle that? How do you have a mind shift?
Yeah, so from my experience, apart from God, you are the next person that knows yourself. No one knows you better than you know yourself. So the secret is being sincere. In my experience, I'm my worst critic. We work at the same place, so you know how we keep talking about attention to detail, extreme professionalism. So when you're not putting in your 100%. So to everyone who's listening to me, even when you're putting in 85, 95%, you know it. So we all need to come to a place where you're first of all sincere, and then the next place is let's welcome feedback. I talk to a lot of young people and I see how they respond to feedback, especially when it's not very positive. So I call those opportunities. So I see how most young people react, like, but no one, we are human. We are prone to making mistakes. And so if you get someone who is genuinely giving you feedback to improve, the secret there is being able to take that feedback and using it to get better.
You mentioned coming to work early, leaving late, but most people, or my generation, we tend to be like, I don't get paid enough for this. Why should I be here more than, if I'm meant to come to work at 7 and knock off at 5, why should I put in the extra time to come at 6:30 and leave at 17:30? I'm not paid enough to do that. So if I'm putting in 120, how then do I create visibility and also not have this mindset of I don't get paid enough for this?
Yeah, so work is a vehicle. It's not an end in itself. So work gives you the platform to improve yourself by getting better. Remember when I talked about being professional, it's acquiring the knowledge, the skill, and the ability. So we need to get to a place where we don't see work as a place where we're getting money, but there's additional benefits. I'll give you a quick example. If I didn't work so hard, like if I'm thinking backwards, like retrospectively, if I didn't work so hard, I would never have met John Fay. So work can bring opportunities such as contacts. And one thing I came to learn was that even when you think no one is looking, someone is actually looking. What you put in now, as I learned from Kawambo, the dividends might not pay or show immediately, but work is an investment. And how much you put in, with the attitude that you do that work, at FSIO we say your attitude determines your altitude. It's difficult to explain to people, but yeah, hard work pays.
That's quite interesting. In your journey throughout your professional career, have you had mentors, or it's just that thing where you said, you know what, I set out to do this, I set out to be great, so I'm going to be great? Or have there been people that have been lifting you up and pushing you to your achievements?
Yes. Remember, I also said, even if it's slightly different, find that person who's going to tell you the truth. And in this case, mentors do. In every setting, I've always looked out for this one person I can go to. And sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes your mentor, because they're going to be hard on you, you're like, ish, I don't like that person. But for me, it's the person that I've always gone to. Yeah. So in every setting, thinking back, all the positions that I've held, all the roles that I've had, there's always been at least one person or two that I've looked up to guide me and to provide feedback. And right now, I'm still looking up to John. So John and I were 3 directors, and as you know, he's serving as CEO and COO, and then we have another director. But I still look up to him because of his work ethic. I used to think I worked so hard until I met him. He's he's a layer or two above me. So I like that because I'm thinking I need to get to those levels. His attention to detail is at another level. Extreme professionalism, and yeah, he doesn't allow the title, to get to his head, and he's someone you relate to. When he says an open door policy, you know that it's actually true. So yeah, I look up to him, and when it comes to feedback, you know that he's gonna give it to you, as it is. Yeah, so yeah, mentors and people that can give you feedback are very important.
What do you think are some of the factors that have influenced your choices throughout your career?
So a lot. Right now, family. I have a wife, a daughter who's 14, a teenager now, and a boy. So I've always thought to do the best that I can as a husband and as a father. I need to live long. So I watch what I eat, how I eat. I exercise. I intend to live long. At least I want to do my part, by doing what I'm supposed to do. But other than that, if you go back to to the beginning of our conversation, where I come from a humble background, that has influenced what I do. I want to believe I'm generous, not just with financial resources, but with information as well. I talk to a lot of young people, employees. There's so many employees that come to my office, like where we talk about career, life. So those are some of the things that have influenced my background, where I come from. I want to make sure my family, and not just my immediate family, but extended family, I can help, create better opportunities for many people. So those are some of the things. And then career-wise, the fact that John and I both believe in social impact, we are creating an opportunity for a lot of young people, like just under 300 now, meaningful and impactful jobs, quality jobs. So those are some of the things that have been instrumental in shaping the kind of man that I've become now.
Having been an employee and now an employer, what do you think are some of the major challenges that you faced professionally in your growth?
As an employer and as an employee, like, I keep coming back to this. I'm a go-getter, so I'm aggressive. I push, but I've learned over time that not everyone will operate at my level. So I've had to learn to be patient, not just in the workplace, but even in the home. Being patient with my spouse, with my children. But coming to your question, even with employees, so just having to learn. Initially, I used to think, because different people operate at different levels and paces, like they were sabotaging. But yeah, I've learned to adapt, especially as an employer. I have managers that report to me, and because I've been an employee and I've traveled that path, I can see where most managers are, and so the greatest virtue has been patience. Just the patience to work with each one, to evolve and to create an atmosphere where they have the greatest chance to succeed.
Speaking of managers, which is quite interesting. Speaking of managers, what do you think makes a good manager? Because I think there is a distinction between a leader and a manager, and mostly we confuse the two. What do you think? How do you think one could be a better leader or a better manager, or should you mix the two?
No, you're right. I mean, there's a distinct difference between a manager and a leader, and if you think about it from an analogy perspective, a manager will be behind the employees, making sure they do what they're supposed to be doing. A leader, on the other hand, is in front of the employees, and the employees are following the leader. A manager can evolve into being a leader, but it's a process. So the manager works with set objectives and targets. We have service level agreements, for instance. We need to do so many, like in the case of a call center, for example, we need to make so many calls in a day, outbound, inbound, adherence to logins and schedules. That's what the manager does, looking at that and maybe looking at the dashboard, who's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. On the other hand, being a leader is at a whole different level. It takes a bit of intelligence, it takes a bit of empathy, humaneness, and appropriately using these to lead a team. It's not enough to just be knowledgeable. It's not enough to just be humane. It's not enough to be just trusting if you're going to be a leader. You need a combination of all these virtues and then use them appropriately, knowing when to use intelligence, knowing when to use trust, knowing when to be empathetic, collectively using them. That's what makes you a great leader. And so if you're a manager, you want to be thinking, eventually, I want people to follow me because of a number of things, the ability to be one that can listen, but firm enough to stand up and say, guys, this is where we have to go, and people follow. Most managers, people who actually have a tough time with managers because managers are bent on set targets, and usually people don't like that. But if you're gonna be a leader, you do it. You're leading, and the way you manage a team is in such a way that the team is actually aspirational. They want to do what they're supposed to be doing, largely because they see you as an example.
That's quite interesting. So do you think how a person leads a team or how a manager leads their subordinates is how the team performs is a reflection of their leader or manager? Would you think that?
Yes, I believe that. Without a doubt.
I don't think people want to hear that.
No, so I need to qualify that. So my own example, we've been able to achieve a lot, and largely because either John or myself, we haven't gotten stuck in the space of titles, or where we are in the system. What we do, we do by showing an example, and that's what a great leader does. Whereas if we want to be managers, we take a step back and picture this like my arms folded, and I'm constantly looking at what are you doing or what are you not doing? So if you're a leader, you know, you are one person people look up to. Like, look, this is exactly how I want to be like when I get there. You know, so that inspires. So a leader inspires, and it doesn't even feel like it's work. You feel like we are collectively winning. We are collectively achieving, rather than the manager is making us do this. So we want to create an environment where you can wake up every morning thinking, I want to go forward.
That's quite interesting. And I think managers and leaders listening should, I think, like we mentioned, have a self-sort to say, okay, if my people are doing this, maybe I should look inward and say, how best do I be a better leader? Mm-hmm. So as we kind of wrap up, as we head to the conclusion, when do you think, when do you know that it's time to exit a workplace? Because you've gone from different companies. So when do you know that I've given it my all? It's time to move to the next thing.
Yeah, very good question. I mean, looking back, yeah, I mean, I'd always leave around the second year, just after the second year, which was a wrong model, a wrong strategy. Looking back, now that I'm an employer, I still have young people, you know, they've worked for a year and I see a resignation letter and the HR tells me, oh, this person has resigned. And I'm like, but they've only worked here for a year. Like, this is when they're beginning to understand the systems, the processes, the job. So yeah, there's a wrong notion. Like, what are you chasing? You know, usually it's the money for most young people. But hopefully what we've created at FSIO, our attrition is still way below 4%, 4 years in. And hopefully the environment that we've created is one where people are constantly learning. And so it doesn't get to a point where the work becomes boring. So when is the best time to leave? Now that I'm an employer, I'm thinking not less than 3 years. I don't mean to be prescriptive, but first of all, ask yourself what your passion is. Where do you see yourself growing? Do you see yourself becoming a CEO in that industry, in that profession? Because if that's the case, then that is where you need to stay, grow, grow in your profession, become an expert, and build from there in terms of your leadership career. But if it's not, even when you're going to a different place, 3 years is essentially, in my view, what I consider okay, like for someone to have mastered what it takes. Because if someone would have stayed that long, they would be a great resource anyway. But I would encourage people to stay long enough, especially if that is where they see themselves growing into someone very influential in that industry. There's no limit as to how much they can stay. The only thing is, do a self-test. Do you wake up every morning feeling great about, you know, going to work? If the answer is yes, then no need to think about leaving. But if you're constantly thinking, this doesn't really align with how I see my career progressing, yeah, at least 3 years. Stay for 3 years before thinking about leaving.
I know I said I was about to conclude, but then you mentioned something very interesting that now I want to just circle back to. In all honesty, we go to work to make money, right? And to eat, have a good life. And we want to move to the next place for greener pastures, which sometimes the grass is not green on the other side. But how then do you help someone who's, I'm no longer motivated to be at work?
it's not doing it anymore. So how can I now say, oh, Fifi, how do you motivate yourself to say, you know what, let's look at the end goal? I think that's why most of my generation is always like, you know what, I'm not motivated anymore. Maybe I don't want to be here. I go to the next place. I'm not motivated anymore. I don't want to be there. Then you find after a year, someone is going to the next place, and you're not finding fulfillment because you keep chasing after something that you don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, Chongo, you're absolutely right. So I'll let you in on a secret on what we look for as employers, as opposed to anything that you might think. An employer is constantly looking for loyalty. And by that, I mean, just like in personal relationships, you're not going to invest in someone if you don't know how long they're going to be there for with you, right? It's the same with employment. I always give this example about maids and security guards. You find an expert traveling with this driver or with this maid all around the globe. You know why? Because these people develop loyalty to their to the people that they work for. So that's the same with employers, and that is why if you've attended an interview and you have so many places where you've been, so in 3 years you've been to 3 different places. Every time I'm reviewing a CV, the first question I'll ask that person is, so why did you leave the last 3 places? Shows you've been moving quite a bit. And why do you think you stay? You know, so even if you tell me a very good answer during the interview, I'm still thinking, okay, let me have my fingers crossed. Let me see if you go over the 1 year mark. So it then work to your advantage if you have so many places that you've been to. You need to show that you can be grounded, that you can be trusted. So it still comes back to I can put my trust in you, especially now. There's so much investment in employees. So before I invest so much, whether it's financially a position or a role or sending you abroad for further studies, I need to know that you're going to be loyal, you're going to be around.
Shadreck, is like with each question you keep opening another can, but we don't have time, and I need to conclude. I think we might need to have another conversation because I have so many questions that I want to ask you. But in retrospect, after everything, how do you think you now redefine success after seeing what you've seen and learning what you've learned and everything that you know now? What do you think is now your perspective of success?
Well, tough question. Yeah. So now the way I look at success is, just getting the satisfaction to sit back and being able to see people around me slightly better because of our connection, that I'm able to do something for them, especially my family or people around me. So like I said, my wife and I do a lot of like just sharing, finances. And so I think it's a tough question, but yeah, it's a combination of things, like we just having the satisfaction that my family is and everyone connected to me, we are at a better place. We are secure. Coming back to my human security obsession, that we're secure. And if I'm being honest with you, from maybe now that I'm 46, maybe from 40, I've always thought, okay, now I'm going towards, my evening of my life. And before 40, I was very scared because I didn't have savings. I didn't have property, like if anything happened to me, it would wipe out everything that, we've been building. So now I'm at a place where I'm like, okay, just a few more years. But if anything were to happen to me now, I know that the people who've been connected to me, they'll be okay.
3 best business advices, not business, 3 best professional advice you'll give to the young people in succeeding.
Yeah. First one, do not look down on your dreams. That dream of owning the most successful company, you can actually do it. This place where we're having the interview, it started with a dream, so we supply paint to the whole of the eastern region of Lusaka. So don't look down on your dream. That's the first one. When you get an opportunity to start a business or to work, it's both a privilege and an opportunity. It's a privilege because there are so many people that can do what you're doing, even better. But consider the fact that you are in that place now. So that's a privilege as well as an opportunity. So guard it jealously. And the third and final one kind of relates to the first and the second. Develop a culture of extreme professionalism. This is something you already know. Extreme professionalism and a great attitude, laced by very high quality. So everything you're gonna do, make sure you develop a culture. So by culture, culture is a loaded word. How it's simply meaning how you do things. So it needs to be a part of you. Being professional, having a great attention to detail, producing work or a service of the highest quality, underlined by a great attitude. That should be how you do things. That should be your culture.
And in conclusion, because the season is called Becoming, who have you become, Shadreck?
I've become an example of when you set your mind to do something, you can achieve it.
That is very powerful. As we let you go, where can people find you and how can people support you? Because you have this beautiful place, so you need clients, you need customers. Where can people find you?
Yeah. First of all, I want people to get in touch with me. I want to hear their stories, their childhood stories, especially if it aligns or if it's different from mine. You can find me on LinkedIn, Shadreck Banda. But I'm also the office is at Garden City Mall, where we work. We now have a head count of just below 300 employees. So happy to have a coffee with someone who thinks I can add value. But in terms of business, yes, we supply paint. We tint. We actually tint paint, so we can tint up to 2,000 colors. install. So we can also provide you, give you technical advice if you're painting. So we do a wide range of interior and exterior paint. We also supply towels. We bring in clothes and shoes from the UK and the US. And then we can bring you your stuff from China, from the UK, from the US, from South Africa. If you're importing stuff, we can bring those things for you. We are found at shop number 4C at Garden City Mall, Great East Road at the airport roundabout.
Okay, guys. So Shadreck is on LinkedIn. I will put in the show notes all the links and all the other businesses that he just mentioned. Shadreck, thank you so much for being on Behind Closed Doors. This was an amazing conversation.
Pleasure. I mean, this has been so good, and thank you for inviting me. Hopefully, I can come back soon. Now,
guys, you've heard how amazing Shadreck has been. I need you people to write reviews and beg this man to come for other conversations from Behind Closed Doors. Bye.
Thank you for joining me on Behind Closed Doors podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, please share it with a friend. Like, subscribe, and most importantly, please leave us a review on any platform that you may be listening to us from. For now, goodbye, darling. Till next time.